Welcome to the Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. I'm your host, Suzan Chin-Taylor, CEO and founder of Creative Raven, the firm that helps wastewater industry contractors and manufacturers unlock the power of digital marketing, AI, and PR to boost sales and opportunities. Whether it's through our online marketing and lead generation programs or providing a fully outsourced marketing department, we are passionate about helping businesses in the wastewater and civil infrastructure sectors not just survive, but thrive in today's digital world. Each episode, I'll be bringing you expert tips and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, we welcome back to the show Pedro Ferreira, and he is the regional manager for the Middle East for an engineering firm based in Portugal and in Spain called Quadrante. And the reason I wanted Pedro to come back in, the last time he was on, we talked about sustainability and, how far-reaching that term or that word can really be used, and the way that certain practices are being adopted in the Middle East, in desert regions, which I found fascinating, with the use of wetlands or constructed wetlands. But today, we're going to be talking about initiatives in the Middle East, primarily Saudi Arabia, that may open up some incredible opportunities for those of you who are listening that are technology innovators that are looking for places that are open to testing or embracing new technology, that, proof of concept, or places, maybe you've run into some resistance in the United States because, I don't mean to bash my own country, but in some areas, there are great new technologies that can solve problems, but we are a little bit, our risk tolerance the bar is pretty high and we're a little bit risk averse. But in some other parts of the world, those bars are much lower. Those hurdles are lower because they don't have anything existing in place, or if they do, they may be open to, okay, we've got a serious problem. What do we have to lose to try things? And so I wanted Pedro to come on and really tell us about these initiatives, and you called it Project 2030, and now you've just gotten through a conference that now they're calling it Project 2040 in Saudi Arabia, and what this means for water and the wastewater industry at large, and what lessons that we might learn from this on a global scale. So with that, the floor is yours, Pedro.
Okay, thank you so much for bringing me back to the show. Let me put it this way. That's the project itself that's been announced back in 2015 was Saudi Vision 2030. And it's basically a proof of concept, and it's been developed as we speak with all the giga projects that everyone has heard, like NEOMs, and it's been working at least on the big scale. I can definitely say it from my own experience of more than a decade of living in Middle East, that 10 years ago Saudi Arabia does nothing to do with the current Saudi Arabia, and it definitely won't be the one that is going to be in the next 10 years. Therefore, the Vision 2030, which is only in 4 years to finish, let's put it that way. It's not official yet, but everyone is already speaking of Vision 2040, which makes quite a lot of sense, as there is the 2030 Expo in Riyadh. The Football World Cup will also be in Saudi Arabia in 2034, if I'm not mistaken. But that opens up all the infrastructure and all the necessity of developing it furthermore the country. Also, was a good opportunity for the vision of His Highness Mohammed bin Salman to change the economy from an oil-based economy to a more diversified. Not put all the eggs on oil, although it's still their main point of revenue. But yes, so if the whole point is to diversify. So if I could say, as a, let's say, of a sound bite, Vision 2030 is a build and test situation, and Vision 2040 for KSA is optimize, export, lead. Let's say it's more consolidated. Of course, like everybody that is making new something from scratch makes its mistakes, but they are fast to learn and to improve. As for instance, for the water sector itself, one of the situations that has been just been coming from some conferences with SWC, which is Saudi Water Company. Well, they have several ones. They also have SWTC, which is more for sewage part, and the SWC start to continue with the desalination distribution and other. They make different departments, which are now companies, all subsidiary by the PIF, which is the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, that fills all of this. All of this development goes even to sports, entertainment, you name it. There's opportunities in every step of the way, in every kind of the field for international companies. Where does it lead on more on the water sector? So on this, it was explained that onwards, the model that is going to be the preferred model for the near future, it's the PPP or three Ps model, that so it can combine the public investment with the private investment. It will be spread out not only in the area of Saudi Arabia, but for sure, because when we talk about Saudi Arabia, yes, it's the biggest economy around the GCC, the Gulf companies, but you also cannot go away from UAE Vision 2031 they have, or for instance, Oman they have a Vision 2040, Qatar is 2030, and Bahrain is also 2030. In Kuwait, 2035. So all of them, with their own nuances, they have its own, let's say, let's say, opportunity outlet that companies can go through. And why is this important, especially being on the PPP model, where definitely is more usual that is going to be more on the design and build, operate kinds of systems. I'm going back to the water system. So therefore, the the opportunity for new technologies is bigger because it's going to be you test it, and if you're so sure about yourself that it's going to work, sure, because if it doesn't, that comes on you anyhow. Therefore, it's a great opportunity for test a good test ground of new technologies on every sector. But of course, there's a big emphasis on it's an arid region. Therefore, water is a very very important asset for them, and whatever brings a little bit extra and a little bit more of optimization for the water, uh, let's say, outputs and sewage, it will always bring. There's always an opportunity. Then of course you need to test and go and make sure that it works. The conditions are always a little bit different, yes, depending on even on the region. Example, what works in Riyadh, which is center of the desert, it will be probably something, and what works in Dubai or Jeddah, which are the next points, which are way more humid regions with a little bit more rain, even with that does rain over there. It does snow a little bit sometimes. It brings different challenges, and but the whole point is to bring the innovation to the market in order that the Middle East has a very young population, and with high level of education, but sometimes with the lack of know-how and skill due to lack of experience as they are quite young. So brings up the whole purpose of this also is on these visions of these programs to have this know-how transfer between the foreigner companies, let's say, to say teach younger local personnel that can then readapt it even better to the current situation they have, and therefore, in a generational point of view, bring more sustainability to the region.
Well, then, that brings this all sounds great. And it sounds really exciting that there's lots of opportunity. So I guess one of the most important things probably for our audience is thinking, okay, well, this sounds kind of neat. How would I even begin to get started? How would I get in front of these powers that be? Where does this start? And what do I need to be prepared for if I decide? I guess there's multiple questions here, but what do I
Mhm.
need to be prepared for if I want to do this? That let's say I am an North American based company, whether it's Canadian,
Mm.
US based. Wow. I think I want to try my hand at this because it seems like they may be a little more open to this. And I'm solving a problem. Where do I begin?
Absolutely. So you always have to think about the local setup.
Right.
It's a trust-based market,
Yes.
and therefore you always need to have your own setup inside. There's always a prior investment, and it's always rewarded when you bring local people inside of that investment. It makes part of the vision, makes part of the, let's say, sustainability at all, is not only on the environmental part. Secondly, you need to be prepared for the different nuances between the countries. KSA, Saudi Arabia, it's even inside of their regions is a bit different between itself. The UAE, for instance, is the more, let's say, westernized by far country. It already works in a non-oil revenue economy, way more diversified, so it's much more stable. As an example, you need to be aware that, for instance, right now the oil prices are low. Therefore, investment in Saudi goes a little bit lower. Then it goes higher. The oil prices, it's easier for them to invest. That's quite of, and hence the whole point is to be less dependent on that. But it's a gradual thing where the UAE, for instance, is a bit more far away on this, and KSA is working on it to get to the same point. But also, while doing that, it creates the opportunity. Then what you also need to take into consideration, it's the frameworks. How do you get into in front of the investors or the opportunities? Normally, and I've done this before. This is actually the third time I'm doing this with my current company. I work through embassies because normally embassies do give some support. Of course, having people that already been in the market before, either it's a local person, of course, that's always been in the market, but a foreigner that also been in the market before gives you a head start a little bit better because it can navigate throughout the nuances of different cultures. You can never underestimate how different the cultures can be inside of that region, and that translates into business culture, as well as bigger projects have, for instance, bigger consultants that come from abroad. I would say Jacobs, comes and all that, which bring different people than smaller projects that will have more local people. So those are two different ways to work. But I would say that full of opportunities, absolutely, and bring, especially for whoever has new technology, it's a good groundwork, and because it's a place that, if you think about it in terms of infrastructure, comparing with United States, you started, and as Europe, we started to have our infrastructure about a century ago, and we went one type of curve. 30 years, 40 years ago, there wasn't much more of an infrastructure in the GCC, and now there's a massive infrastructure, but there's still much more to go. So their learning curve, and that their which we can be a parallel with our opportunity curve, it's higher by the amount of time necessary to prove concept.
So, Pedro, would it be a safe assumption that maybe one of the paths, or maybe you have some others to share with us, that consulting engineers, maybe some of the larger international ones, as well as your mid-size and local ones, depending on the type of technology or the things that you want to get involved with, depending on the scale and the size, would be a good entry point as having someone almost like a Sherpa to connect with, that's going to run you through the channels or bring you in front of those people that you need to meet with locally, or are there some other ways that you would recommend, since your company has had their flag there for a while,
Uh,
that have worked for you?
Sure, it's one of the ways, definitely. But my point of view, as it's such a trust-based and sometimes protective market, for me, and this is one of the techniques I use, I go to more institutional channels, like for instance, the embassies. The embassies can link directly with the key stakeholders in terms of their internal organizations of Saudi Arabia, and not only. Let's say that you can. That's the job that I have to do myself, is to get into to be with these people. So because ultimately they are the decision makers. And
Right.
let's say executive director of a Saudi water company, let's say, or that would at least bring you to their procurement and technical teams, so then they will validate this. And definitely the best contacts come through embassies, or
Okay.
when you have people that are like myself, for instance, that are already working there, that already have already a pre-established network of contacts. Depends, of course, on the field. Sometimes works better. Is not an exact science, because as it's a very competitive and very changeable market, people going in and out quite fast. So your contact somewhere 2 years ago is not the same contact that you might have now. It's very, very rare to have people in the Middle East that work for 10, 20 years on the same company, at least on my experience. Including for governmental companies, they change position. There's a much more dynamic on that. But yeah, and therefore that's the it creates eventually a problem sometimes, but also creates opportunity, because a new person brings new ideas, brings freshness, but also can take you up. So you have to play a
Right.
little bit with this. So that's living in the Middle East. That's normal. And but everything that we can justify as a new let's say, disruptive technology. As an example, President Trump, the first trip that he made was to the Middle East because of data centers and artificial intelligence, which is now the big thing, data. There's a reason for it. And of course, they are ultra open to something that is completely new, is the most new thing that we have in our, let's say, life and society. So applying the same modus operandi for AI to water, which is more consolidated market, that's for sure. But there are still a lot of innovations to be done and to be bring on to the table. If someone, let's say, comes with a way more efficient way to do, for instance, desalination, they are the first ones to hear about it, because no one will be more. Saudi Arabia has more desalination than any other country in the world. So, of course, something that would bring an extra to the table, they are the first ones to listen to you. And of course, that comes also with sewage, because they are planting. For instance, Riyadh is having the biggest central park of the planet. Therefore, millions of trees that are going to be there. So they will need to irrigate all of that, and reusing wastewater instead of desalinated water for sure is going to bring them an extra reduce their cost, let's say, an extra optimization uh, for for their water needs. And they have so much development, and therefore the need of so much utilities that includes water, mainly water and power, of course. So whatever optimization anyone can bring in by talking with an embassy or people that are on the ground, you will sooner or later, a little bit later, depend a little bit, you will get to the right channel that will be listening. It's not like I'm not gonna say you will knock on the first door and it's gonna be red carpet, of course, but the potential is there, and they're really willing to listen, because that's the modus, that's the idea. It's to bring development is already there, but optimizing and bringing to a worldwide scale Riyadh and Dubai are making the two biggest airports of the planet as we speak for a reason as well, because they want to be the center of the world. So they need to work for it, and this is part of it.
Well, you made a really good point about one, data centers. They want to be a power, they don't want to be oil dependent. But if we think about how much water data centers require
Yeah.
and irrigation, it's just like I used to live in the Palm Springs area and everybody wants a golf course, but that was
Mhm.
a desert. And you change the climate when you do that because now it's no longer a desert. You create a hot aspect, but where does all that water come from? And so when you're saying about desalination, which can be very expensive, but there's other technologies, there's other methods for reclamation aside from desalination. So for those of you who are listening that have a technology for water reuse and closing the loop, what better way than an area that is a desert that needs this water, that wants to develop, that needs water sources for data centers for cooling? There's got to be better ways of doing this. We just had a guest on our show from Egg Geo that's, talking about geothermal energy and
Mhm.
how from the natural byproduct of what happens in a wastewater system, if you harness that properly, you could actually power a whole community
Absolutely. Yeah.
from something that is basically you're looking for a way to get rid of it anyway. You have to deal with it anyway. And
Yeah.
so, what you were saying is these communities, and this is so refreshing, that the fact that they are open to looking at new technologies because of their goals for growth and getting back to our first episode, true sustainability.
Exactly. So imagine UAE has this vision for 2050 that is net zero. And
Wow.
honestly, I think they're going to make it because all goes with that line. And if one of these countries goes, the other go as well. That's the usual. And of course, they are testing this in probably one of the most harshest climates of the planet. So if it works there, it will work basically almost anywhere. So that of course brings innovation with it, and that brings opportunity.
And I just want to wrap this up of, what you were saying, having a local, you must have a local footprint or at least have a strategic alliance with someone who is a local. And I've learned this, myself in when, gosh, almost a decade ago, I wanted to plant my flag in India and have a branch office there. And what
Mhm.
that takes in order to establish a footprint and a network is you do need a local. You
I
do need
agree.
someone that knows the culture, understands the culture, that can help you, what you were saying, navigate those channels to try to do it. I look back now when I was doing this, there's no way that I would have ever been able to do what I did trying to go on my own, just knocking on a door as someone from the West. One,
Mhm.
you were saying about trust, and even culturally, it's all based on relationships and trust.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
people will trust their own. So if it's a well known person that's very well respected within those channels, who's basically vouching for you, they're going to be more open and receptive to hearing what you have to say because their friend Haman or Pedro is saying, this is a good guy or this is a good gal. Listen to her. They have something I really like. I'm recommending this. And so that can really go a long way of thinking, we're talking about opportunities here, but don't go in blindly. Being
Absolutely.
be prepared. Be prepared. And this leads me to, I think that Pedro, you and your firm are a great resource for people that you've opened up the doors for this opportunity of maybe networking with you, maybe forming strategic alliances with you. Maybe there are projects that you are working on, or of people that are working on projects to network and open those doors. And so, how can people learn more about what Quadrante does and get in touch with you to maybe discuss next steps or maybe opportunities of working together?
So one of my points is always to make bridges, and I think I always say that the sum it's always bigger than the part. So
Ooh.
having it's always been my motto, and that's part of my work as the regional manager of Quadrante for that. And but I'm always available. My LinkedIn profile is something that I use every day. My contacts are online, and I'm always available to have a chat with anyone. Not even on the only on the water business. The water, that's the one I dominated more for my personal experience, but even on other kinds of business, because for instance, the real estate business in the Middle East is a massive thing, gigantic. Every problem that we have in our westernized part of the world is actually something that doesn't really happen there, because the construction is higher than the demand. So the prices don't get crazy as in our in our countries, unfortunately. And so anytime anyone may want to reach me, please go ahead. I'm happy to help.
All right. Well, thank you again for opening our eyes up to these, opportunities that exist in other parts of the world. I think sometimes, the planet's getting smaller and smaller, and with the internet and AI, we all share the water resource. And I think it's important that we share the innovation and the ideas, because then everybody benefits.
Absolutely.
It's like, it's something we talk about. We are, despite maybe religious or political changes, or, beliefs or cultures, we
Mhm.
all need water to live.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think, when it comes down to it, we are all more alike than we are different on a core base. And so I just love the fact that these programs are available in this part of the world. And I think, maybe other countries can take a play from this and learn a valuable lesson. So again, Pedro, thank you for coming on to the show. And for those of you listening, I hope you will take advantage of that opportunity to, tap this amazing resource that is Pedro and the opportunities over there in that part of the world. And thank you for sharing your time with us today. And until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you're ready to take your marketing to the next level and start increasing sales and opportunities for your business, reach out to us at Creative Raven. We're here to help you thrive in the digital landscape. Visit creativeraven.com or click the link in the show notes below to schedule a call and learn how we can support your growth. If you enjoyed the insights on today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you'll never miss an update. Until next time, keep growing and keep it flowing.